Welcome to the Punjabi Mental Health Podcast by Taraki. And we're here today in Birmingham. I'm very excited to be having this conversation in collaboration with Dunya, focused on creativity and resistance in Punjabi communities. We have a fantastic panel of guests who bring different types of experience within and across the creative industries, and we'll be hearing a lot more from them. But before we jump into that, I want to start with a really important and really serious question. For those who've been to the podcast before, you'll know what this important and serious question is. So I'm just going to ask the panelists, just introduce a bit about yourself, how you got here today, a bit about how you express yourself creatively, what that looks like to you. But the first really serious question is, what is your favorite kind of burrata? And
Starting here.
you have to be respectable. We have to be respectful of each other when we say these responses. In one of them, someone said avocado burrata. And everyone is entitled to their response about their best burrata. And so, I would say it would be, this conversation will stay in the room, but this is being recorded and people will see it. So we'll start with Amrapal.
Yeah, I want to be really like hipsterish and say something stupid and trendy, but it's aloo in it. Like we're not gonna mess about. Like it is aloo. Like it is just trusty dusty. And you go to Punjab, it just slaps so different. When you go to a tabba, oh my god, it's different gravy. But aside from that, I'm Amritpal, AS Kalar. You can call me that. Don't call me that. Whatever. I'm a producer, sometimes a DJ. I love music. I listen to music, I play music, I make music. If I wasn't doing anything else, I'd just be listening to music all day. So that's how I'm here. And anything I can do to promote music, my world, it's Punjabi music. Grew up listening to Punjabi folk music, UK Bhangra music, but also hip hop music, R&B music, that kind of stuff. If I could promote like the history of it, the culture of it, you're going to see me there doing it. So yeah, that's me.
I was also thinking I need to say something interesting, and I could say something interesting, but I think I'll just be honest and also say aloo paratha. That is definitely my favorite, especially my mum's aloo paratha. Try myself, but I can't quite get the same standard. My name's Kavita Banod, and I'm from London, but I've been living in Birmingham on and off. First moved here at 18, lived here for a decade, lived in different places, including in India, in Delhi, Himachal, London, Manchester, and then came back to Birmingham about 7 years ago. So it's my kind of chosen place that I want to live, and I see myself being here for a while. My creative thing is literature, storytelling. I guess since I was a kid, I've been writing stories, telling stories. I wrote my first novel when I was 14 and got a prize for it. And I've been writing fiction for many years, but also just doing lots of other things connected to literature. Including translation. So I'll talk about that in a second. I'm really interested in Punjabi. I can read Punjabi and Hindi and translating literature from those languages. But also, I started writing fiction at quite a young age, but became really interested in thinking about politics or reading and writing. I was a big reader since I was a teenager. And I started to kind of think about my own writing in a critical way in my 20s and think about the importance of doing that, and also the influence of what I had read, and really thinking about it as kind of ideological and how everything is kind of through a certain lens of thinking. So creativity is not this free space that we kind of want to think it is. And so I started like reading other writers critically, starting off with kind of British Asian Punjabi writers for my PhD, for example. But that's something that I've really continued. So alongside my creative practice, it's been as important to me to always be engaging critically with with stories and with literature, including, so I've kind of always go through layers of, okay, I'm really critical now of these white writers, or I'm really critical now of the British Asian writers who are writing in Punjabi. But then I'm also feeling that there's things that we need to really examine in our own languages as well. And so some of the work I do is about also critically engaging with literature in our languages. And I organize JAG Festival and have a JAG reading group. And the kind of center of that is to be learning, really important to kind of do intergenerational dialogue, and to be learning from our elders, but also to be questioning them as well, and to look at literature always in a really critical way, because it's got all the kind of structures that are, within our communities, including patriarchy or casteism or colorism or class, and all of these things are in the literature in our languages too.
Thank you, Kavita.
Hi everyone, my name's Rupinder. I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I predominantly focus on writing and performance. I guess I'm just a curious human being, and I'm just interested in finding the right vessel for my creativity, and that might be different things, but that's okay. But my sort of, what's the word? Obsessions are the same, I would say, whether it's in my writing or in my performance, whether it's, I don't know, writing about Punjab or whether it's about the body or language. The obsessions always continue in the range of my work that really comes through. And yeah, I'm just curious about the world and myself, and I try and bring my truth and the world's truth into my work. Oh, I forgot to say my favorite Bronco.
That was the main part of the question.
My favorite paratha is aloo wala paratha.
Is it your mum here?
It's not just because of that, but I also actually do like broccoli wala paratha. It's quite, I know it might sound a bit weird, but broccoli wala paratha is quite nice as well. So yeah.
Fantastic. Broccoli is a good shout.
Yeah,
Broccoli's a good
it's
shout.
nice, yeah.
Well, I'm going to start off by being a bit dishonest. I'm not going to say aluwala, even though that is my favorite. I'm going to say it's really important to get your 5 a day, so methi is where I'm going to land.
You say methi is part of your 5 a day?
Yeah.
Is it?
It's green, it cuts.
I don't know who to defer to, because no, we're all creative. Everyone here is creatives or not.
No, just believe me. And so my name's Rohan. Worn a few different hats. I worked in the music industry for about 2 years as a creative producer in Birmingham, trying to champion like local grassroots talent. Then I kind of went to the dark side, worked in advertising for the past year. And you do see some of those dark attention hacking forces. And I think reflecting on my experiences, I've really got an interest in how tech is impacting society. And there's a lot of narrative and discourse about how it's affecting the worst kind of destruction of community, selling content and artistry. So I was just thinking, how can we approach it from a positive light? How can we leverage tech for the good of creativity, community well-being? And starting PhD, trying to dig that further, because I'm done with corporate advertising, at least for a little bit. Yeah, so that's me. So the struggle, it's hard to put it in one line because it's quite different, but there you go.
And I think you mentioned there about the different side of the creative industry that you've worked in, and I think between the panel we've got a real breadth of people's experiences, both in creative practice, but then also in industry, but all pulled together by this thing that tries to help us express and learn about ourselves, our communities, our world in different ways. And Ryan, I was just going to jump on that, and I'll come to the other panelists on this as well. Like, who is your creative inspiration? And that doesn't need to be someone who's big and famous. It doesn't need to be someone who's necessarily from our communities, but just someone who you've always looked to and thought the way that they express or the way that they create things or the way that they make sense of things is just really, really beautiful.
There's a few different ones. He's not in the room, so I can say it without going to his head, but my dad's a big factor. He's not a creative typically, and I think we'll kind of discuss this later. I think how we think of what creativity is and creative arts are probably a bit reductive. People just think of them as
music, visual art, film, and I love all those things. But also, I'd like to see it as more of a mindset, kind of thinking outside of the box and using creativity to bring your own thoughts to life. And he's done that in like the academic field, with the focus on how can I creatively articulate the value of the small businesses, communities, Sarah Road, Dudley Road that I've grown up in, to an audience who are ignorant to them. So it's him first of all, and it's him I've tried to take a positive inspiration from. From a pure artistry point of view, I was actually never really heard at weddings and film, TV. I never was fully into kind of Punjabi and Asian music till about 5 years ago. I was big into sort of like guitar music. My dad, big Bruce Springsteen fan, so I play bass guitar. And the band I really like called Bowls, the singer from that is just that mindset of how we can think out of the box, follow your passion, and rather than building on narratives that are kind of imposed onto you, bring your own thoughts and paths to life. So two different.
Did you like that Bruce Springsteen film? What was it? Into the Light?
Yeah, something like that. I did watch it with my dad, and he just kept looking at me. He's like, yeah, that's me. It's me. I'm like, yeah, I got the idea now. We're now into film. So I did it 50 times. But yeah.
I feel it's a really good film. For those who aren't aware of it, it's essentially about a young South Asian guy who's really into Bruce Springsteen in like the 80s. Is it the 80s?
That's right. That's right. 80s.
And it's just like everyone's like, why are you into Bruce Springsteen? And he's on this mission to see Bruce Springsteen play live. And it's great.
That's the one. Yeah, he's not kind of bound by who people think you should be listening to and what you should be doing. He's just living kind of authentically and following what he's really into, which I think is a good lesson.
Fantastic. Rupinder, how about yourself? Like kind of, who are those creative people who've driven you?
To choose one particular person, but I think in the recent years, when I had mentoring from a poet called Rachel Long, something that I really learnt from her was about how to bring your own truth into your writing. And I think that was something that I was trying to do before, but I think it wasn't until I actually had mentoring with her and really understood what it actually means to bring your truth into your work. Especially when you want to create something authentic or something that is truthful to you. You know, where are you sitting in your work as a writer? And I think what are the stakes that are being placed as well, and how can you look at something with like a bird's eye perspective and just go really, really close with a magnifying glass as well, getting as close to those nitty gritty details. So that's something that I've really, really taken from her, and I try and bring it in all of the disciplines that I do in my work.
Fantastic. You love that. Kavita, how about yourself? Creative person.
So I was sitting here thinking, because I think I've gone through life looking up to people, but then I feel like this it's part of like maybe who I am. Like I start then also been critical as well. So I don't really believe in putting kind of anybody on a
You
pedestal.
end up being disappointed.
No, I don't end up being disappointed. I guess it's more like I feel like everybody is just part of, like, including myself, like part of this world, and I don't really think anybody kind of transcends that. But I was thinking about a writer that I really admire, and I was thinking of Anjali Gajal, who's a friend of mine. She lives in Delhi. And she is about the same age. She writes short stories. She's from Punjab. She writes in Hindi. And I met her maybe 2 decades ago when I was living in Delhi. And for a long time, I didn't know that she wrote. But then she started reading her stories to me. And I think it's because of her wanting to read her stories and translate them that I started to kind of improve my Hindi reading. And did eventually translate her stories, and they were published in translation. And I admire her so much because she is immersed in life. and her life is very hard. She works full time for BSNL. She has children who she absolutely prioritizes and has brought them up in such an amazing way. The artists, and she navigates so many things and so many struggles of life, but she draws on her own life and those around her for her stories. She's a feminist anti-caste writer. She's always growing all the time. All she writes is like she manages to write maybe a story every. She started when she was 18, writing a story about an incident of casteism in college, and she just has written a story maybe once every 1 or 2 years. And through her stories, like looking at her stories, you see how she's writing about everyday life, but you also kind of think, but why have I not read about this before? Why is this something that I've never come across in literature? For example, about everyday casteism. And it makes you understand how a lot of the time, like literature can be a filter and it actually erases things that are everyday and happening and they're not really kind of seen. So I feel like she kind of goes past literature to actually access the world and life and what is happening to try to capture them in her stories. And she's still kind of always thinking and changing as she goes on. But she does that through like living. So like really challenging this idea that we see in the West as well, as in, other parts of the world, of being a professional writer or by being a writer. And I do really believe that actually doing the thing is more important, and what you produce is much, has more depth than kind of being this professional writer who is, removed from life and the struggles that we have.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I went through like a million names like as this has gone around, and I'll try and focus on a musical perspective, but I really
I'm
want to.
interested in the other names as well.
No, there are other names, but it's a very controversial name. And if I'm being true to self, if you asked me this like 3 years ago, I would have said Kanye, like that. And it's a bit touchy. It's hard to say that. And like we talk about the pedestal and stuff. But if you go through his music, genuinely, I know it might be a generation thing or whatever, but the vulnerability in his music, and if you dig into it, if you go past the controversial statements, whatever, that's how an artist should be. Like that's what music should be. Wear your heart on your sleeve, show everything, vulnerability. You compare that to like the music coming out of hip hop today, where it's so like, it could be AI generated. You can listen to Travis Scott's album and it literally could have came out of ChatGPT. But that old Kanye where he was saying everything that was on his mind, and you saw his mental health, like, I don't know if this is a problematic word to use, but deteriorate. And you saw it through his music. You saw him become more manic, and you saw the bipolar come out. And it, in a way, it gave confidence to me. I'm sure like a lot of other people, of like, you can still navigate creativity and go through those creative avenues while still going through what you're going through. Just be honest and vulnerable about it. So that's definitely one for me. Another one is, I'm a massive film head, like I love films. So Martin Scorsese for me is the GOAT. He's the best. But if you go past like, again, Goodfellas and all that stuff, if you watch stuff like Silence, Irishman, King of Comedy, Last Temptation of Christ, these are films where he's investigating his own soul and his own morality and his morals through the medium of film. And through that, he's questioning structures of power, structures of religion, structures of morality. And again, he's doing it in a way that you can't judge him for it, because he's saying his own personal opinion and he's letting his own personal story get out there, again, through the medium of film. So yeah, those would be my two answers.
And I think you've kind of jumped into that, what was going to be my next point, which was that link between creativity and the self, and like creativity and your feeling about your place in the world, whether it's something that you're going through in a helpful, positive way, or actually if it's something that is supporting you when you're going through a difficult time. And so I guess for you, what do you see the link as being between creativity and well-being specifically?
I think where this will be different again, maybe like for Ravinder, who words are her specialty, right? But where words fail for me, music steps in, right? And That's where a beat machine, beat pad would step in for me.
Don't you just produce words, but they're instrument words?
Someone will say words on top. Well, yeah, actually, yeah, I'll produce instrument words. Exactly. I think for me, that's an important thing, actually. Like for me, beats have moods and feelings, and expressing that in the music is vital. And I think if you haven't gone through a heartbreak, you can't make a truly heartbreaking song, for example, right? You can't fake that. Sure, you can make something that sounds ducky, right? But does it have that same sort of like depth to it? And I guarantee the most heartbreaking songs you ever heard, they came from a real place. And I think that's what music is for me. It's like genuinely a channel to express that without having to be on the nose. And I appreciate like the ambiguity of it as well. Like anyone can sort of pick it up and have their own interpretation of it. But I put my own kind of thing into it and people pick up on it. It's cool. Yeah.
And what impact does that have on, say, someone like yourself, as someone who's creating?
Oh, it's so cathartic. It's so cathartic. I won't go into details about something, but last December I went through something and it was on my mind like all day, all week, whatever. I went home and no matter what I was doing, even listening to music, it was just playing on my mind. It was just there. It was there. It was there. Talking to people, it was there. I was like eyes glazed over kind of situation. Like you couldn't get through to me. The only thing that helped was opening my laptop up and making and creating. It let it out. It was more than a distraction. It was like, I don't know, a healthy rechannelment, if that makes sense, of bringing it into a nice like sphere of it. And by the time it was done, I didn't care about what I was thinking about. I just wanted to listen to it like a million times to check it was good. And that to me, I don't know if it's healthy, unhealthy, but it helps me. And I think a lot of artists would agree in the sense of it takes what was plaguing you and hurting you and gives it a nice home, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And I think people who are connected with, whether it's forms of creativity, whether it's forms of expression, who do it because it creates a home for the difficult times.
Yeah.
I think that's a really powerful way of putting it. And I guess, Amrapal kind of threw you into it, Ravinder, when he was like, should be able to word it better. But I guess for you, what is that link between your creative expression and our sense of self or our sense of well-being?
I think like, especially when I first started writing because I was a teenager, it was really to make sense of myself and going through a lot of confusion and trying to think about who I am. And I think writing really allowed me to sort of get to the I wouldn't say the core essence because the search for the self is endless. It's a lifelong journey and we're constantly growing and evolving. But I think writing, especially when I was a teenager and in my early 20s, it was a form of self-expression. It still is. But but I would say it was only after in my late 20s that I've actually really allowed myself to be vulnerable with the words and really pour my actual heart out. I think before that, it was still a fear. It was still like, oh, I'm not sure if I want to go into that territory. I was still holding back. But I think when you let go and you truly surrender and be honest to yourself, I think that's when the best work also comes out. And that's when you truly feel a sense of relief as well. Because before that, it's just like there's so many things in your head, in my head anyway. But then when you actually put them down, when you're being authentic and when you're being truthful and when you're letting that out, then you kind of come at ease. I think before then, I'm still learning as a writer. I'm still growing in terms of that. But I think now I really use that approach of just trying to really be as truthful, and that's what's really, really helped me in my journey. Yeah.
Why writing? Because I know people at different points will pick up different ways of expressing themselves creatively. But what about writing drew you into that?
I think it was just I think as a teenager especially, I think it was the easiest form of expression for me, the most accessible, whether it was just me.
Mine was eating.
Whether it was just writing in my diary and not knowing, okay, is this a poem or something? But of course, later in my years, I have done like other artistic disciplines as well. And like I was saying earlier, it's about trying to find the right vessel, and I think your soul kind of knows that as well. So whether it's a poem or whether it's like my more recent work is more theatre and film led, and I do think there are some things that can't be kind of completely said in a poem, but I feel like the poem is like the sort of the core of it. Whereas I think when you're creating like a play or like a film, you can really go into the extension of it. But I think just to write down your sort of basic feelings and let them out, I think a poem is a really good way to do that.
Amazing. And I think that's the first way that we connected, which is through the poetry that you've written and performed. And it's great to see that, this is all linked together to different things. So Rohan and Kavita, I kind of wanted to shift the direction of the conversation a bit, to think a bit more about, yes, we've talked a bit about creativity. We have a bit of an idea about how creativity can link into our sense of self, our sense of well-being, support us to express ourselves in difficult periods, and also be a vessel through which we can learn more about ourselves in this kind of lifelong journey of self-discovery. But I want to understand from yourselves, our communities aren't coming from like a neutral context. Many of us, our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, whoever, would have moved here to the UK and been through and kind of gone through a process of migration, which brought difficulties as well as new opportunities. And there would have been different points at which our communities had to stand up for themselves, for other communities, stand with and alongside other communities as well. I guess in your mind, what is that relationship between creativity and creative expression and communities standing up for themselves? I know it's there's different sides to the question, but what do you think that relationship is?
I think it's sort of an extension of the sense of self, which both Rupinder and Amru have spoken to. I can give you an example. So my mum grew up in Derby in the 60s and 70s, and she grew up on a road that led to Pride Park, the football stadium. And every Saturday, Sunday, all the match-going fans would walk past their terraced house, and if they smelt the tarka smell or Asian food, they'd put a brick through the window. And I think cooking and South Asian food is such a part of the culture and who you are. It wouldn't have been a truly like authentic Punjabi family without the food. So my nanny, instead of kind of giving into them, she used cooking as a creative, authentic form of expression, and she used it as a form of resilience. She didn't let them take the food and the culture away. She woke up at 5 a.m. every morning, cooked for the whole week. No bricks were thrown through their window. She still had that kind of creative and authentic form of being, and the whole family kind of enjoyed the food. And then that's kind of passed down to me. And without that, I wouldn't have that connection. Without that creativity, as one resilience, as one self. So I think that answers the question a certain way.
Yeah, I think that was a really powerful kind of example and really speaks to two key concepts. The first of which is the fact that our communities have experienced hardships and different forms of discrimination and violence in different ways. And second, that doesn't always mean that, someone writes a song about it or someone produces a beat about it. But that type of creativity you mentioned is almost that everyday creativity that sometimes we forget about. When people ask, "Are you creative?" Sometimes, as we've said, things are, I don't draw, I don't paint, I don't write poetry, I don't write literature, I don't, produce music. But everyone has their own type of everyday creativity that can be linked into how we're standing up for ourselves.
Yeah, 100%. I think I spoke earlier about creativity is almost like a mindset or an emotion. And I think anyone can be creative. A banker can be creative. A doctor can be creative. Even if you look at cooking, although there's a classic recipes, I think every family, every nanny out there has their twist on that classic and has their own personal touch on it. And it is that kind of process, or rather than consuming, taking an original idea, start and create something out of scratch and bringing things to life. And that can be done in many forms, not just music, although it's fantastic, and cooking, textiles, sewing, the mindset.
Have you ever had cocoa milk?
That was not something I ever want to have.
Yeah, see, so
That's a question.
normally, have any of you had cocoa milk?
I've had coconut.
What are your thoughts on cocoa milk?
It's actually, I think I had it when I was a bit younger, but from what I remember,
It's okay, you can say you had it yesterday.
no, actually, I'm trying to remember. I feel like it was a bit like cooking, but
What do you mean cocoa milk? Or like milk and coke or coke and
Milk and coke.
No, but which and which?
So it's 2/3 milk, 1/3 coke.
yeah.
Okay.
And so it kind of links into what Rohan was mentioning, and you have to hear me out. Firstly, you can go to Disneyland and you can buy a Coke float, which is just Coke with a scoop of vanilla ice cream in it.
Right.
So that dairy Coke combination is not unheard of.
Yeah.
But the second thing is, I grew up having cocoa milk, and people look at me like, "What the hell are you on about?" And I gave it to one of my friends once, and he almost vomited. But he might actually be lactose intolerant. That's why he vomited, not because of the flavor. But for me, there's at the base of that story. There's the ways, I was kind of given cocoa milk by my parents, and they were given it by their parents, other relatives, and people in the community. But actually, it was a way of being creative with food, drink, when actually the resources that you had weren't massive. And the other thing that reminds me, we grew up having something called bunni bread, which is just dava bread, right? Where it's, bread with 4 bits of butter on it, and you just chuck it on a dava that you cook a roti on. And again, these are just small little things, small daily expressions of being creative and doing things slightly differently in context of, limited resources and limited availability. But I actually just did that to just understand if any of you did cocoa milk. Well, I'm not going to make you promise to taste it.
Unique experience.
I'm not going to make you promise to taste it, but it's not as bad as you think.
Yeah, it's actually not.
It's actually not. But there you go. Aretha, just to yourself, that question around creativity and resistance.
I had all these thoughts in my head, and then you kind of threw me with the coke and those. But I have recently come across people talking about having Ribena milk,
It's the best.
which is seems like a version of a ruafsa, but I don't know. I guess adding on to what Rohan was saying about everyday creativity, I guess on one hand, being creative feels like what it is to be human. So it's kind of a way in which we can create. I mean, there's something in us, and I think it's probably there in all of us, because if we observe children are all creative, and it feels like the world and the pressures and expectations, and often it can be based on the maybe gender, like men perhaps lose their creativity at a younger age, but also the kind of pressures that kind of suppress that innate creativity and expressing yourself in whatever form, singing, dancing, storytelling, cooking is just something that kind of we are drawn to, and it helps us to feel alive. It helps us to feel human. On the other hand, though, I guess I'm kind of wanting to throw a little kind of spanner in there. So something I've been thinking about, that maybe it can also be something that is a kind of distraction, or because I was just thinking how often it is that we talk about women, for example, who, and it is true that this was amazing and really important everyday creativity in our families, the embroidery, the fulkari, the painting, on the walls, the singing, the kind of, the folk songs, all of that was something that women would do, but also it's something that's kind of often been something that certain groups would do, and it feels to me like on one hand, I think it is important for us to recognize that and give it importance, because it's been erased and it's been kind of not really given that importance. But at the same time, it feels to me sometimes that it can also be a form of like endurance, or a form of, so you're kind of maybe not directly in a head-on way taking on the kind of oppression of society, but maybe some of that, what you're going through, is reflected in the creative expression, but you're not kind of confronting it. And so I sometimes feel uncomfortable with romanticizing too much the women's, like, bolia, because actually I feel like a lot of the time they're kind of still navigating patriarchy, and they're still within patriarchy. And maybe they express a lot of the pain, but they still are very much within it, not really dismantling it. Um, so that's one of the thoughts that I had, which is that maybe sometimes it can also be something that we can romanticize, but it's not as much of a kind of radical act of resistance. And the other part that is, I guess, the two more things I was thinking about that. The second is the content as well, and it's important. So I think actually just doing it itself is not enough, which is why I was talking earlier about why it's really important to me to always be critical, because actually if we start looking at the content, and especially because my field is like words, if we think about the words of, of some of those songs, or even if we think about the stories and we think about the ideology, we think about um, the violence, or the colorism, or the patriarchy within them, and coming to this country, for example, connected to what Rohan was saying, that that it was amazing that we were producing, like, for example, there's so much like music. Bhangra came, and there was right from the 60s there was this expression, and a lot of it was also writing about the hardship of lives here and singing songs about it. But at the same time, it's also often from a kind of male point of view, and about going to the pub, or going, like, it's very much kind of erasing the woman. Um, if you think about some of those really classic songs, I don't know if anybody has really listened carefully to Kala Shakala, which is so, no, sorry, not Kala Shakala. I was actually thinking of, I'm thinking another one, but I can't remember what it was. It will come to me in a second. But it's kind of about domestic violence, and it's really kind of, in a way, like, not questioning that at all, but normalizing domestic violence. Gala Doriga, that's the one I'm thinking of. And so I also do think it's really important for us to really question the content, and not just creativity in itself, just being, an act of resistance. And the third thing that I was also thinking about is, when I'm talking about it as a kind of act of endurance, and an act of, to kind of feel alive. At the same time, I think when creativity becomes commodified, when it becomes something that you can make money from and gives you power in the world, it's not just a private thing. Making, storytelling, even whether it's writing or making films, it's often not the most oppressed, who actually benefit from that. And that's where appropriation comes in. It's actually the ones who have the most power. You'll suddenly get, the men, or the kind of upper castes, or you'll get those with class, or, whatever kind of power it is, they are the ones who can often take that and then, benefit from it. They can, by kind of really fetishizing perhaps the form or themselves as individuals, and profit from it. So I guess, yeah, just a few more layers into thinking about all of this.
Absolutely. And I think it kind of brings us nicely onto the next part of the conversation, which is, yes, we've established this relationship between creativity and our communities, creativity and the self and well-being, creativity and resistance. But as you said, if we analyze it solely through the lens of resistance, we might end up almost putting too much emphasis on what we think is activities related to resistance, but actually it just continues and perpetuates the power that exists. And I think, Amritpal, just as you're someone who is involved and engaged in the modern music, say Punjabi music scene, how do you feel that those kinds of comments fit in?
It's fascinating. At heart, by the way, I'm a historian. Like, I love history. But if what you were saying just then about like lyrics and the complicated relationship that some of these songs and artists have, if you go to Punjabi folk music, right, and we go to the 70s and the 80s, we're talking Put Jattan De, Ni Put Jattan Da, blah, 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 blah. All these Jat-led songs, right? They weren't sung by Jat, right? Manak wasn't one, Shinda wasn't one, Chatkila wasn't one. Lal Chand, Yamala Jat, Lal Chand, right? I don't have to spell it out, but like these weren't Jat figures. For them, the resistance, like artists had that, they were from low caste backgrounds, and it was almost like an escape out of that for these artists. And yet when they escaped out, they had to sing about the caste dynamics that they were kind of subjugated to. And it's interesting because if you go to Jat households back then, they were told, "Oh, bajon wale hai, oh, gaun wale hai." Jats were stopped from engaging in the music industry because you had your role, you had your niche. And it's interesting that when you flip forward to today, who are the biggest artists today? Karan Aujla, Sidhu Moosewala, Diljit Dosanjh. We're talking Jats, right? What changed in the last 30, 40, 50 years? I think the diaspora has made those relationships so complicated, and an avenue that existed then for people from Dalit backgrounds, Ramgarhia backgrounds, other backgrounds in Punjab doesn't exist anymore today on a mainstream level, to the point where Arjun Dillon isn't Jat. He has to adopt a name to fit into that scene. He's from a Marathi background. He can't say that. Raf Sapira, when he first came out, he wasn't openly like loud and proud about it. He's had to kind of not hide it, but it's almost like a tactical thing, like a political kind of way of maneuvering it. And it's interesting that those systems of oppression still exist in music, and you see it quite intimately.
And so would you say that this type of music that you're describing now, is that still supporting our communities to stand up?
I'd say not. I'd say absolutely not. And it's one big thing that, like, coming into this event I was reflecting on is like, what kind of songs are actually coming out? And if we go beyond like the jargon that we always talk about, guns, girls, drugs, alcohol, whatever, I think one big theme that is missing that did exist in the 70s and 80s, when you talk about songs about Dulla Patti, about John Amor, about characters that challenged the system, about the society, that really doesn't exist today in that sense. They've almost become commercialized, trapped into like systems of hyper-capitalism and consumerism to the point where they're just caricatures. And even guys like Sidhu, Karan, whatever, they're guilty of taking those figures and making them just, oh, I'm like that because I ride around in my Jeep this way. And I'm like that because I tote my gun this way. But what were those characters, what were those figures actually saying about society at the time? What were they actually challenging? And are you challenging that in today's society? It's not happening. And it's a big fault line, I think, in the music industry.
And what impact does that then make on the relationship between creativity and well-being? Because what I'm hearing is we've seen the massive commercialization of, in your case, Punjabi music. When you have that, what do you lose? And if we might feel that there's still this connection between Punjabi music and well-being, what is that, or is it like something that's like false?
I think it's natural. Like how I spoke about Kanye before, it's natural for us to find kinship in artists and to find similarities and to find familiarities. So if you're a skateboarder, you liked Lupe Fiasco in the 2000s, right? If you liked Jacars, you liked whoever, you liked Ludacris, for example, or whatever. You found that kinship. But if all the artists today are singing about how much money they have, how many girls they have, how much gambling they're doing, what kinship are you finding in the artists? And then what is the reciprocal relationship between the listener and those? take us out of the equation. Younger listeners, what are they actually getting out of it? What is Punjabiyat becoming going forward? Because we think that Punjabiyat informs music, but music also informs Punjabiyat, right? In my opinion, anyway. And I think back then, the 70s and 80s, maybe we're being nostalgic, like sentimentalist about it, but it promoted a very humble, agrarian, common kind of attitude. And artists and singers were almost at the same level. Like there was no difference. And you could meet a Chagila, you could meet a Monica or whatever down the street, and it'd be kind of jokes. And people have stories of like drinking with them or whatever, and it's like it existed. Punjabi music's become so massive. These guys are at an ivory tower and they're looking down and they're telling us about their lifestyles, and we're eating it up and we're taking it in and we're thinking our lifestyle's the same as that. You see people on their Instagram stories, like they're riding around Soho Road listening to Courtside by Karan Aujla. Bro, he's in Beverly Hills. Like that's his lifestyle. Where are you finding kinship in that? And at the same time, what are you perpetuating? You're perpetuating that hyper-capitalistic consumerism. So it's missing, I think.
It's the illusion. It's the illusion.
It's the illusion, and it's not to get like Marxist on it, but like you've been spoon-fed something and you're taking it and you're ignoring so many different things while consuming that music, and you're ignoring your own lived realities, not just your own, but Punjab as well. And yeah, we don't even need to get into that, but that's a real thing. Yeah.
And I think that's a really important reflection, because we can think about creativity in the past and how it's developed, but thinking about what that looks and how that feels like now. And I do want to come to Rupinder and Rohan on this. Rupinder, because you're not necessarily in the same creative scene that Amritpal is, but do you see things like that within spaces that you occupy, and how do you overcome them? And then Rohan, you mentioned earlier that you've obviously worked in the music industry and in advertising and all these different kinds of things. And I'm wondering whether the creative industries still are a place where we can feel a sense of well-being and wellness. But I'll come to Rupinder first.
I think it's sort of becoming more welcoming, definitely, I would say. But I think to really be authentic and to sort of showcase that we as Punjabis are so diverse, because I think the problem comes, like, especially I think like in theatre, for example, when you say this is a South Asian story, like, what does that mean though? Because South Asia itself is massive, and then if you're going down to being like Punjabi, Pakistani, Bengali, and then then you've got Punjabi kind of thing. And I think to sort of really authentically and truthfully tell our stories, I think we're still a long way yet. We're getting there, but it's definitely a long way, because we're still sort of, even whether you're a writer, whether you're an actor, as an actor, you could be cast as someone being Bengali, but you're Indian. And then you're like, is that really authentic? That kind of stuff. And then you've got writers that might be telling stories because it might benefit in them. It's making money for them. It's trending for them, but it's not authentic to their lived experiences. So I think it's definitely interesting who gets to tell the lived realities of our communities and what that means. And I think there needs to be work done on that, like, definitely. Who gets to tell those lived reality stories, and when do these stories get told, and how they get told, and who tells them as well, that kind of stuff.
And actually, that's a really difficult thing to do,
It is, yeah.
because someone expressing themselves or creating some kind of output
Yeah.
that might help and support them in their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it's almost as though if someone, again, supports themselves by creating something that can be used against
Yeah.
others. So I think that's a really complicated.
Yeah, and again, I think there's so many different factors that go into it. I think Viet was talking earlier, like class has got to do with it as well, and then like how well connected you are, and then again, like who gets to tell those stories. So I think it is very, very complicated.
And have you seen those types of barriers in the industries that you've been a part of?
I think, yeah, definitely. I think, as I was saying, I think to truthfully tell something, to be authentic, I think just within even our own communities, I think we're still making progress, so then to sort of think that our mainstream audience is going to be okay with it. I think it's like, can we first be okay within our communities as well? Can we sort of share truthful stories there as well? Can our communities come together and understand what's going on within our homes or outside in the world as well, before even expanding beyond that as well?
Because there's that new play out, Real Estate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I've read a lot about it. And again, that has received different bits of backlash. It's received a lot of critical acclaim
Yeah.
as well. And we just don't know where that will lead to. And is it just going to be pigeonholed again as...
Yeah, that's the thing, because we're constantly, I feel like, again, it's like just 2 weeks ago, there was a bunch of creatives that were meeting up at the Hippodrome, and we were talking about like the industry and stuff, and we feel like, have things actually evolved, or are we just going back in the same circles that we've been doing? Are our stories still being sort of just stereotyped? And how do we go past that narrative again? How can we actually truly express our truth and bring ourselves to it? Yeah, that's still so difficult. Yeah.
Again, big questions.
Yeah.
So Rohan, I guess on your side, you've worked in the industry, you've worked in advertising, and thinking about what that looks like in the modern day, and does it still allow creativity to be a vessel for supporting our well-being, or are things changing?
I think there's some useful distinctions that have been made. One between having a creative practice and thinking creatively, and the impact that that has on well-being. If you're talking about the global superstars who capture widespread attention, I think it fundamentally they create with that profit motive in mind, which kind of does distort that voice, because certain things sell better than others. If you talk about the content that Amrit was I was mentioning earlier, that sells better, it captures a wider audience for widespread reasons. But that doesn't mean that being an artist or being creative, you can't be kind of values led, make an impact. There's a great example on the route. Seen GS India walk in, fantastic album, came out last year, Dead Before Dishonor. Values led, made impact. I think above all, it brought people together. Rupinder just spoke about collective action through community. I think communities are kind of eroding everywhere with the rise of digital culture, social media, the idea of kind of story selling instead of storytelling. You go on your phone, you walk outside, everyone's trying to sell you something. Communities, the way I think people kind of congregate is changing. It's becoming more health conscious. So there's running clubs popping up everywhere, for example. I can't think of anything worse. When I go for a run, I need like the Rocky theme tune on full blast and just like to mentally torture myself to finish it. So running with a group of people, I can't think of anything worse.
Also, I imagine you have a much bigger stride length than most people.
Yeah, but it's a lot more mass to carry around. It takes longer. But I think having a creative interest, as we've been speaking, it's another fantastic way that people come together. And I think it's so important that people come together and reject being so isolated, kind of sitting at home. Although there's a place for doom scrolling and, who doesn't mind like a cheeky 10 minutes of that. If that is your life, I think, there's work to be done on a more systemic level, bringing people together.
What's your favorite place to doom scroll?
At work when no one can find me.
No, and I think I really kind of understand and appreciate that. And I think we need to also look at this, as you mentioned, you kind of got the global superstar creativity, you've got, the global industry, but then you have so many individuals and communities who are just doing this as a way to practice and as a way to feel connected to each other, to their communities, to where they live. And I guess in the face of all that, because at the end of the day, the majority of folks here and the majority of folks who are going to be listening are going to be people maybe who have a creative practice that they do from day to day. It might be something as developed as, being in the music industry, producing beats, writing lyrics, whatever. It might be people who are writing their own plays, writing their own novels, people who are doing a whole lot of different things. Or actually, it could be people who have those small moments of everyday creativity that mean something to them. And how do we, like, how do we support them to develop that creative practice and not be drawn in by these kind of difficult forces, whether it's commercialization, whether it is big business, whether it's the attention economy, all these different things? How can people be creative but not have to sell themselves? How do we do that now?
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue is we live in a recession, right? And times are hard. And I appreciate that at home, I had it, I'm sure I had it quite easier compared to a lot of other people, but your parents saying, you are not doing that. Like, you are going to go to uni and do this and do that, and you're going to get a job and you're going to do that. Even in my case, I'm doing music. I'm not doing it full time. I would never be allowed to do that full time unless it was viable. So I think I have a lot of sympathy in that sense for parents, because me and Rabinda were just talking about it. What structures are there to actually support artists in the UK? Your National Lottery Fund, and you have to write bids for it, and almost
Plus time and money to write.
yeah, and you're getting on your hands and knees for it. It's like, it's actually demeaning in a sense for doing that, and it's effort, like you said, and that support system isn't readily available for everyone. So how do you continue navigating your creative pursuit? A lot of people just give up. I know so many people that gave up after 18, 19, and I know so many people 10 times more talented than me. I said, nah, I mean, there's no point. It's not going anywhere, right? And it's because those support systems aren't there. What I would encourage is parents to be like supportive of that, because what we also have to do is take a step back and like, where are we as a society, as a community today compared to Punjabis 50 years ago? So much more privileged. Like, use it. What is this money for? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Is it just to keep building houses and escalate to the Punjabi middle class, become upper class, and then what have you actually gained out of that, apart from the fact that you've moved to Sutton from Mansworth? Like, you've lost, like, your kids have lost so much. And
There's someone in the audience here.
I'm sorry.
God.
I'm quite close to the same generally, but it's important, I think, to let people pursue in these times, because it's only going to get worse. Like, society isn't going to get any better overnight, I think, in terms of economics and whatever. So does that mean creativity just stops because it's impossible to make money out of it? Creativity exists not just to make money. It exists to challenge those forces that exist in the first place. If there is no creativity, there is no challenge, there is no push and pull, and you're left with what you're left with. So I think it's important to see that relationship, and for Punjabis to kind of engage with that and be critical of it, which we're not, because we're not a critical community. But yeah,
We kind of shy away from.
we just accept things, and we've accepted that we've moved from Punjab to here, and we've accepted the class structure, and we've accepted our place within it, and we've accepted we need to climb the ladder. What we've discarded is what Punjabi was originally, and what actually exists there, and how society progressed there. And it was through art. It was through a rejection of the 9 to 5, right? Like, and it was through creative mediums that don't necessarily fit into neat boxes here. And yeah, they were kind of, if you go back to Punjab, like I was talking to Jaskanwar just now, like you go back to Punjab and they have like an idle lifestyle. Like, they just live according to how they live. Like, they're farmers, they could do whenever they want, kind of thing. We don't have that here. But what we do have is 10 times more money. Let's use it for creative pursuits. Let's come together and actually do that. Why are we relying on National Lottery Fund? Right? That's my 2 cents on it anyway, but yeah.
Was that the Amritpal Creative Fund?
That's whatever, please fund me. I want to make an album, please fund me. That's what that is, yeah.
Rita, I've seen you've been copiously writing notes.
I have like so many thoughts that come. This is from like what we were talking about 15 minutes ago.
You're just thinking about cocoa milk.
We'll mention the cocoa milk and put me off track again. No, I mean, I was thinking about some of the things that we were talking earlier that sort of making notes on, in terms of authenticity and appropriation of it, maybe, or keep on the track of the question that you're asking. That's a concept that we also need to kind of question, partly because authenticity is one of the things that's kind of commodified, but also what does it mean to be authentic to yourself if you have been formed by certain oppressive structures, for example, as an upper caste man, or whatever it is, and you're being authentic to yourself, but then there's kind of something that really needs to be challenged in what you're expressing through that. And I was thinking about appropriation as well, and I was thinking about how this is a conversation we have these days, but it's something that goes all the way back to when people will often say that, like, Sufi music, for example, is really radical because it's taking the kind of voice of women. So it'd be men singing often in a feminine voice, or perhaps the perspective of oppressed castes. But actually it's still through a certain gaze, and it often, those lived lives become kind of abstract and metaphorical. So you're talking about, being like humble, or being kind of, but actually that doesn't serve a woman to be kind of subservient or being humble, but you're talking about it in this kind of abstract way. So I guess I was just thinking about, again, who has the kind of power and the space and the connections. And so on one hand, what you're talking about is really important, that kind of space to hold on to your own creativity and self-expression. I was thinking about, when I was talking about Anjali, in the question you asked about, like, the writer that I look up to, and I was thinking maybe I was actually, like, it might sound like I'm romanticizing her struggles, and I don't want to do that either, because actually the truth is, for a lot of people, the hardship of life and survival and pressures, whatever they are, mean that it's actually very, very hard and sometimes impossible to have that space, whether it's actual time or the headspace, or sometimes your mental health is affected, your nervous system is activated. How do you express yourself? Sometimes your whole life can go by like that. So in an ideal world, everybody should have the space to be able to express themselves, but that's not the reality. And I do want to say it is really important to talk about the ways in which culture also contributes to that, like the way in which the music you're talking about, or films, or stories, they all normalize certain structures of oppression, which is what is contributing to that situation where a lot of people will not be able to produce or be creative because they are, because patriarchy is being normalized, for example, and you are enduring that abuse. You don't even perhaps even know what's going on and what's happening, because everything is telling you, the culture and music, that this is normal. So it's just not a simple thing. And also thinking about, when you do produce, perhaps what you are doing is fitting yourself into an existing form. So you're talking about artists like Kuldeep Madak or Chamkila, but actually what the songs that they're actually producing. And the same goes with literature. This is something I've kind of, done a lot of work on, thinking about, like, critiquing diversity, for example. You're ticking diversity boxes, but writers are writing stories, and everybody's saying, great, we have all these diverse writers, but they were perhaps, especially in like 10 years ago, they were writing facing white readers, and they were actually just telling the same kind of story from the same perspective as what had come before. They're not doing anything so different in all that kind of culture clash. We're so oppressed, and we have to escape communities in order to kind of succeed and become British and be part of the center, and very individualistic. So that is happening all the time as well. When women are writing songs and they're singing, it's very rare to find them doing anything differently.
Mm.
So maybe they had, the men were writing songs about Tu Sharab Di Botal, and then she will just sing a song and write a song about herself, kind of objectifying herself or looking at herself from a distance. And because it's been so deeply internalized, and it's because that's what you're just kind of fitting into what already exists. You're not doing anything radically new or different. But also the people in power, the people who publish, who record, who promote, are all going to be those people in power. So how much actually also potential is there for you to do something different? So I'm not really being very optimistic.
No, that absolutely wasn't optimistic, but I feel like it's a balance, right? And it kind of leads me.
Sorry, I just
Oh,
add,
God.
I just want to add a little optimistic. So I just want to say that I do still think that there is potential. Partly if we face away from like centers of power, if we do try to do our own thing, if we create collective structures of power to promote and support and fund different perspectives, but also to something I talked to Sharonji about in the past. I also do think that the only way also that we can produce something different is to constantly create critical spaces where we actually listen to, and talk about, the music and the films and the literature and what's already there, and bring our lived experience to those conversations to say, well, that's really, really, problematic. This impacts our life in really, terrible ways. If we can really see it clearly, we could maybe produce something different.
Thank you. And I think that kind of question about future vision brings us on to what is our kind of final question for today. Normally I ask what your future vision is for Punjabi communities and the world we're trying to work towards. But what I'm going to ask today is a similar question, but you answer in one word. Like, if there's one word that you want to see exemplified in the future for our communities, what would that word be? I'm not going to go in order. Rohan looks in deep thought.
I'm in deep thought. Congregation?
Why congregation?
Oh, sorry, I thought that was it. I just think there's as has been mentioned across the panel, there's like true, genuine power in coming together over common interests, common causes. Although it's tough to effect change yourself, I'll bring you what you're passionate about together with forces of other people. I think that's how change can be made.
It's empowerment, and I think on like multiple different levels. But from my perspective as a music producer, DJ, whatever, there are very obvious systems of power in place in the Punjabi music industry which do not empower producers or musicians or actual artists. Singers are richer than ever. Like, they are as rich as they've ever been. And producers are here like clamoring for placements and fighting. And this goes for any creative discipline, but they're almost fighting each other at the like bartering against each other, setting prices so low for themselves and devaluing their art just to meet an artist demand. And in that process, if the singer has that creative sort of license and power, is what it leads to what I was talking about before, in the sense of you don't have songs that actually challenge society anymore. I firmly believe that comes from a grassroots position. And if you're not there and you're in your ivory tower, you're not seeing the lived realities. I think if producers were empowered to have that, not just that say, but like that leverage in that dynamic, in that power dynamic, you'd lead to a much healthier Punjabi music industry and a much more diverse one.
And actually, if people were empowered,
Yeah,
to be able to have more of a say in what their lives and what they want to do.
exactly. I mean, how many people just mindlessly like shuffle on the Punjabi hits playlist on Spotify, on the Punjabi 101 playlist on Spotify, and not actually critically engage with artist discovery? What happened to that? Like, what actually happened to going out and finding someone? And we do it for hip hop, we do it for R&B, we do it for all these other genres, but we're happy with an artist just appearing from nowhere in Punjabi music industry. We're happy with a Chimma Y blowing out of nowhere, and it's like, don't know where he came from, but now he's my number one listened to artist. It sets a precedent for fans being completely subjugated, producers being subjugated, lyricists being subjugated, and singers being empowered, and labels being empowered.
And within that, the whole creative industry being devalued.
Absolutely.
And which brings us back to the original conversation, which is about that sense of resistance, that sense of self, that sense of well-being.
Yeah.
Actually, if that's devalued, then the practice by others who are also doing this.
It's why people release 3 albums a year now and like a single every week. Like Taraki does it all the time. I think he released an EP earlier this year, then he released a single and a film the week after. And it's like he recognizes that we ourselves have just accepted the fact that we're going to consume music like that, and we're not challenging it, we're not stepping out of it, and that's how you lead to a stifled industry, and it will just lead to more of that.
Definitely. Kavita, Rupinder?
I'm still thinking, but the word that I'm thinking of is something that sort of describes a light. So we hold onto this sort of light, or like this candle, this like diva, I don't know what it is, that just reminds us that despite things that it might feel dark, there is still this light, and there is still this one ray of light, this ray of hope that if we do come together, if we do truly want to make a change, it can happen.
That's very optimistic. That's brilliantly optimistic. Kavita?
Can I say 2 words? I kind of mean something.
Yeah, go for it.
I guess listening and self-reflection. So I think always to listen to anybody who says that this is violent to me, or this silences me, or this kind of oppress contributes to my oppression, to always be open to listening and understanding that perspective.
And then the self-reflection to be able to then act on it and act on changing, depending on what it is that you're listening to.
And perhaps acting on changing by not then sitting on a stage and talking about that yourself necessarily, or writing a song about it, but giving space to somebody else to actually put that perspective forward.
And I think that just in terms of how we've all discussed creative industry, creative pursuits, it can support us to listen, whether it's to others or to ourselves, and helps us on that, or should help us on that process of self-reflection. But unless we're careful, especially in kind of modern times, that is harder and harder to do. And individuals, everyday individuals, can lose that sense of listening and self-reflection to help themselves in their creative activities, because everyone's looking for everyone wants to secure the bag in different ways. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being such brilliant and insightful guests today on the kind of Punjabi Mental Health Podcast, where we have been talking about a whole range of topics around creativity, resistance, well-being, community. But I feel we did land on something that was forward-looking, optimistic, and shows us that we can build on the things that we've had in the past. We can overcome the challenges of the present, and hopefully build towards something more inclusive, empowering, and collective in the future. So thank you very much.